Alright, welcome back to the internet. We're going to talk about why indie hackers can't scale. If you don't know me, my name's Adam. I dropped out of college about 3 years ago, and I've been in the online internet money making space since then. So this video is actually about word associations, alright? That's the big surprise, and I think this is very important because when you first start out indie hacking, you go, yeah, dude, this is going to be sick, it's going to be so easy, I'm going to scale my business. It's not like that. And so I'm going to draw an analogy, and then we'll actually get into these terms. So the analogy that I want to draw is walking versus hiking. So when I was a kid, my parents used to say, hey, Adam, do you want to go for a walk? And I would go like this, all right? I would go, yeah, I would love to go for a walk. But then when they say, hey, Adam, do you want to go for a hike? I would go, like, I don't know. That's supposed to be someone, like, trudging along, like, oh, fuck. So I'm crying, right? So when I would think about walking, I had a positive association versus hiking. I had a negative association. But the reality is, they're very similar, all right? And when my parents said, do you want to go for a hike? It often meant the same thing as going for a walk. It was good. I mean, you might drive somewhere, but you would walk around a little bit, and then you would leave, and it was just a walk, right? But that's the problem with indie hacking, okay? Because basically the issue is it seems like a walk, but it's actually a hike. This is the reality of indie hacking, and they're not the same thing, okay? They actually are significantly different. So let's start with the first one, which is indie hacking. All right. So when I think of indie hacking, I think of several things, and those include doing lots. Oh shit! Stand by. Okay, so doing lots of projects. So starting many different things. You gotta like test things out. You gotta experiment and learn. So we're doing lots of projects, lots of micro projects. We might say high profit margin. Okay, so you're gonna be focused on just keeping it lean and mean. So we'll add that like few to no employees. And so this is what kind of comes into my mind. And I think this is really kind of sums up what a lot of people think about when it comes to indie hacking. It's all this stuff. It's super light. It's lightweight. You just, you build your business to 10 grand a month profit. It's all profit. And then you go and live in Bali, right? Everyone I talk to wants to live in Bali. I want to live in Bali. Let's be real. But the reality is, what you should be thinking of is being a founder, okay? And founder/founding. Because if you start with this mindset, there's entirely different kind of ideas that come to your mind. So with being a founder, it means hiring when you need to, all right? So right off the bat, like a founder, some of the best founders are just really good at placing talented people. And so they do hire. And then not doing lots of micro projects, being extremely focused on one thing, all right? And then, profit margin, you can still have it be high. But in general, the thing with indie hacking is, like, when I first started my SaaS, I thought it was just going to be like an indie project. I would grow it. It would be great. And then I could go do something else. But what I've realized is that, sure, I could scale this project up to like 10 grand a month in profit. And then go do something else. But getting something else to 10 grand a month in profit is so much harder. Like, I could probably get this business from 10 grand a month in profit up to 30 grand a month in profit in the same amount of time it would take me to get another business to 10 grand a month in profit. And then guess what? I have two businesses to manage. And yeah, sure, I'm making a similar amount of money, 20 grand versus 30 grand in total. But you have two projects to worry about, two businesses. And so in general, it's actually much better to stick with one project, right? You can kind of go into it with the mindset of a indie hacker, but once you actually get started, that identity, it's all about identity. That identity is actually going to hurt you more than it's going to help, okay? Because you're going to be like, how can I do this super lightweight and, not put anything into it? But in reality, you have to be a founder. You have to literally sit there for fucking hours and just like slave away, and it's really hard. It's not super fun and light. And so that's kind of, I guess, like, that's the harsh reality, but that's the truth. And that's why I think the indie hacking term is kind of damaging when you're just starting out. And now we move on to the second part of this phrase. So we have indie hackers. Now, this second word is scale, okay? Because scaling is also something really funny, okay? So for scaling, we'll say, when I think of scaling, like, grow instantly without effort, basically, So if you haven't been in business for a while, people throw around the word scale and scaling a lot. But if you're new to business, you kind of think of scaling like, especially if you're technical, serverless functions scale. All right. I had a bunch of events hit my endpoint of Vercel function, and that motherfucker scaled, dude. It went from like 2-3 instances just constant up to like 10,000 instances concurrently running, just like boom, instantly, like 10, like 3 or 4 orders of magnitude. That is scaling. All right, it just instantly goes up. That is not how your business is gonna go. Okay, because the thing with business is that, let's say this is you. Okay, this is where you are right now. You have an idea, but you don't have a product yet. And so what you do is you go and you try Cursor or you try lovable.dev and you try to build out your product, and that fails. Okay, so then you go here and you try to build it out yourself, but you do a really bad job and it ends up not being able to work really. And then you go, okay, I'm going to build it from the ground up with these things in mind. And then you finally get to a point where you actually have a product built. Okay, and that's just getting the product built. So now you actually have a product that can be, used on a computer that people can pay for. But now you have to get customers. Okay, and so to get customers, maybe you try like running paid ads, but you realize you have no idea what you're doing. And then maybe you try like making YouTube videos. And I mean, obviously you just want to stick with one and actually make it work. But the point is, like, this is not scaling in the way that a serverless function scales. This is like a fucked up, convoluted path of founding an entrepreneurship and building a company. And so what I'm gonna rebrand scaling to is growing. And maybe you could say like building, okay? Yeah, growing / building, okay? Because this is actually more of what it's like. So if you grow a business, actually, you know what? On the fly, we'll go just building. So to build something like a fence, it's a shit ton of work, okay? That's the first thing. It's a shit ton of work. It takes a long time to do it. Like if you're building a fence or something, you might feel like you're fucking it up. There's uncertainty, there's like difficulty, there's time, sacrifices. There's all this stuff that goes into building something, okay? Or growing a business. And this is, I believe, what you can do. So you're never going to be an indie hacker that scales a business, okay? Most people can't do that. Peter Levels is an exception to the rule where he creates some gay-ass like flight simulator app and he can scale that up overnight. But for the majority of people watching this, you are going to be a founder that builds a business, okay? And that's how you should think of yourself, because just thinking of yourself like, I'm an indie hacker, bro, I scale businesses. If you've never done that before, which I can guarantee you won't have been having done that before, you're going to be a founder that has built a business, and so that should be your identity. You need to think like a founder rather than an indie hacker that, doesn't try too hard, just like do the bare minimum to make the money. No. You're a founder. You have to build an actual business, and building a business is not as easy as scaling a serverless function or scaling whatever, you're actually building a business. So yeah, that's my thoughts for today. Hopefully this is helpful if you have been thinking about building a SaaS or if you're actually building one. I found that now that I'm building a SaaS and it's actually kind of working, I found that the hardest part is kind of, or not the hardest part, but one of the difficulties was my identity wasn't aligned. Because I would think about like, damn, how am I going to grow this? And I go, I might need to hire someone. And you're faced with this kind of decision when it comes to growing your business, okay? So this is where you are right now in whatever stage. Let's say once you get some customers, you can either go big, all right? And you can try to build like a big bootstrapped company. Like you could do, depending on your TAM, you could do like $1 million, $10 million, $100 million a year. Or you stay small and you do 100K a year, and maybe you go live in Bali or something. This is going to be a palm tree. That's a beautiful palm tree. So you're faced with these two paths, all right? And this is going to be you sitting on a hammock on your laptop. Now, of course, you could probably sit on a hammock, if you're building a big business, but the reality is you have to choose, all right? So if I wanted to, once I hit 10 grand a month in profit in my business, I could go move to Bali and, have a social life and start like having fun and, hanging out with people and going out. But that would be a sacrifice, because what I could also do once I hit 10 grand a month in profit is double down and try to get to 100 grand a month in profit or revenue. And so that is the choice you have to make. And an indie hacker, I mean, at least from my kind of mental understanding of an indie hacker, which I think is probably pretty similar to yours, I don't see an indie hacker doubling down and going to, like, build their business into $1 million a year. I guess for me, indie hacker is kind of synonymous with like digital nomad. And so a digital nomad or an indie hacker is going to be like, man, 5 grand a month profit, 10 grand a month profit, I'll fucking take it. I'm going to go live in Bali. And I mean, I guess I'm not really judging. I would say I want to actually kind of set myself up for the future, And so if I have the ability to do that, then I think it's probably smart to like keep scaling a business, because none of us know what the future holds. SaaS could go to zero as an industry from AI. But yeah, I think that that's just something to be aware of, and it could be possibly helpful. So let me know if this resonates with you. If you also have these thoughts around like entrepreneurship and indie hacking and scaling and growth and these terms, because I think they can be a little bit, it's kind of like one of those things where someone's trying to sell you something. It's like that, bro, quit your job and build a 100 grand a month or a year business in a month. That's never gonna happen. Unless you come in with insane skills, that's never gonna happen, right? So it's never gonna be that easy. Even like established founders, they fail all the time. So you're not gonna like scale your SaaS, and then go live in Bali. You can still live in Bali. I'm definitely gonna move to Bali, but I just don't think it's gonna be something where I'm taking my foot off the gas. I think I'm gonna have to like place employees and think about like the long-term kind of growth strategy of this business and the positioning. Because yeah, I mean, like, there are big winners in every market, right? And you're either a big winner or you're either a fart smella or a smart fella. All right, this has devolved into gibberish. I'm gonna end the video here, but thanks for watching.